Good evening, class. Today we're going to look at the fourth lesson for the Wordly Wise. Because this is the fourth lesson and the way the book is set up with lessons 1 through 4 being paired together, you will actually, instead of on Friday having a Wordly Wise 4 quiz, you're going to have a Wordly Wise 1 through 4 test. So I highly suggest that you get back your note or look back at your note cards for the other ones and be prepared to turn those back in on Friday. So on Friday, you're going to be handing me in 60 note cards for lessons 1, 2, and 3, as well as this week for lesson 4. So if you lost 1, 2, and 3, it looks like you've got a lot of work to do this week, especially since I told you not to throw away your note cards. Okay, so the words this week. The first one is autonomy. The quality or state of being self-governing or independence. That idea of it runs on its own. So it's kind of like that idea of an autonomous nation. So it's the idea of like when the United States wanted to become the United States from Britain, it wanted that because it wanted the idea of its autonomy. It wanted to be independent and it wanted to be self-governing. The next word, circumspect, is an adjective, cautious and prudent, or heedful of consequences. If you look at the picture here, it says the idea of watch your step. So that idea, if you're circumspect, you are cautious to what's going on around you, and you're watching your step as you're entering into like a bus or a subway or going upstairs. But it's not just doing with stairs or how you're walking, it's also the idea of things around you and doing something new and being aware of those consequences. The next word is composure. It's a noun, calmness of mind or bearing and self-control. So it's how you actually control yourself and the idea of being calm, not being obnoxious, not being overbearing or stressed in the mind, but having that composure, that calmness. The next word, edifice, a large imposing structure or building, or a complex structure or system built up over time as if it were a real building. So the picture here you see is the Eiffel Tower, which goes with definition number 1 about the imposing structure or building, and that idea of it being very large. There are many edifices around the world that would fit into this. The Statue of Liberty, the Great Wall of China, a pyramid, one of the Great Sphinx in Egypt as well. The second definition is a little bit more complex, with the idea that the system or structure itself and how it's built up, it feels like it's a real building. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a real building, but it feels like it. Ensconce is to settle or place securely or snugly. So if you see the picture here, that idea of that surgical mask or the breathing mask put on the face, that idea that when you ensconce it, you're placing it securely on your face with the rubber bands that go behind your ears, so it's ensconced on your face. And notice the fact that it is a verb, so using it in the verb form is important. Environs is a noun, the area adjoining or surrounding a place. So kind of like that idea of this is the root for environment. So it's what's directly around you, and it specifically is adjoining. So that idea that if you look at Los Angeles, the environs around Los Angeles are the areas directly around or surrounding the city itself, which would include places like Glendale, the San Fernando Valley, because those are directly there. The Pacific Ocean, the beach, all fit into that as well. Hapless is an adjective marked by the absence of good luck or someone who is unfortunate. So the idea of if you're trying to make a soccer goal, and the ball hits the post and goes out versus going into the post, that's something that's hapless. Someone who also has bad luck is that they're constantly losing things, can't find things, constantly in that aspect or that unfortunate aspect. Heinous is an adjective, shockingly evil or wicked. So if someone commits a heinous crime, they're doing something so evil and so wicked. So the idea of on the level of like serial killers, bank robbers, and it's something that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be. That's why it's shockingly evil or wicked. So you don't necessarily expect someone to do something on that level. Incognity is an adjective or an adverb. It can be used in any version there, with one's identity concealed or unrecognized. So that idea of if you go in somewhere or you're doing something anonymously, so the identity is concealed, it's in the idea of you're doing it incogniti. Indoctrinate is a verb, has two definitions: to teach or train the fundamentals, or number two, to instill or teach from a partisan point of view. The first definition is the idea of what you've been learning since kindergarten and preschool, that idea of the fundamentals. You're kind of out of the fundamental stage and you've moved higher on, especially since you're taking AP classes, so we're building on the fundamentals, but it's still that teaching and that training aspect. The second definition, to instill or teach from a partisan point of view, partisan meaning unbiased. So the idea is that the teacher doesn't teach you how to do something like they're only going to teach you about the Republican way and not the Democratic way. So that idea of kind of why I don't talk about politics in the class is so that I'm being that partisan point of view aspect. Interim is both a noun and an adjective. The noun verb, or the noun form, is an interval of time between events. The adjective, belonging to or taking place between events, or temporary. So the idea of interim, time between events, so the interim between your classes would be your 5-minute passing period or your lunch period. If you have activities and events that are taking place in class, the interim is the idea of the interval of time taking place between the two separate events. Summer could be considered interim. It's the idea of the interval of time between the two school years. And usually the idea of the main fact here is that it's temporary. So the interim is going to go away. Mausoleum is a noun, a large and impressive tomb. Looking at this picture here, it doesn't look like it's actually a tomb, but it is. That idea that this is probably in a cemetery, how large it is, how it has doors and windows, but bodies would be buried in here, coffins would be stored, there'd probably be sarcophaguses or statues of some kind, but it's very large, it's very impressive. And if you remember back from Romeo and Juliet in 9th grade, at the end of the story, when the two of them both die, they're dying in the mausoleum that belongs to one of the two families. The next word we have is pillage, to rob and plunder. This goes with our word earlier, marauder. When we were talking about pirates earlier, pirates actually pillage, so that definitely fits in here, or marauders pillage. So they rob and they plunder. Bank robbers also fit into this, petty thieves, but the idea of someone who actually steals from someone else. Reverie is a noun, the condition of being lost in thought or a daydream. That idea of being lost in space, where you're sitting in class and you're just staring off into the middle of nowhere and not really paying attention, and then when someone taps you on the shoulder or gets your attention and you snap back into it, you've been broken from your reverie, you've been broken from your daydream or your lost in thoughts aspect. Thralldom is a noun, or thrall and thralldom both fit into this idea of a loss of one's ability to act freely. So if you're in a state of thrall, you're in a state which you have no control. Usually it's slavery or bondage, so those both fit in here. So when the slaves were living on the plantations and they physically had no control over what they could do, they were living in a state of thralldom or a state of thrall. Okay, those are your words for this week. That's all 15. This gets you 60 words. I'm hoping on Thursday to actually do a boss battle on the Wordly Wise in class. So if you need that power for your healers, please make sure they get that before Thursday, so that they are prepared for it. And working on note cards, because those are due on Friday as well. I will be collecting all 60 together. And have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow in class. Thank you.